take into.
All right, call this meeting to order. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation Electrical Safety and Licensing Advisory Board on Thursday, September the 26th, 2019. I am newly appointed Chairman Mark Roach, and at this time we'll call the roll to determine the quorum. Please answer present if you're here. Michael Gamillion, John Lewis,
Here.
Stacy Malcolm, Stephen Pomacall, John Sparrow,
Present.
Gary Strauss,
Present.
Marcus Lundgren,
Present.
and David Whitmire.
Present.
All right. At this time, I'm going to take a couple of liberties here to recognize some folks. Real quick, first of all, for all of you who traveled long distances or short distances, whatever, to be here, we appreciate you being in our audience today. To all the staff and administration that's here, I want to recognize a new deputy director. He was the former chair of TDLR who appointed me as chair of this board, but now he's on the team. Mr. Mike Harris-Mendez.
Thank you, sir. As I said, and I told you earlier, that the moment I appointed you to this board, I went ahead and stepped off because my work was done. So
I don't know if that's a good thing or what. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike. And we have a newly appointed member of our group, David Whitmire. David, I'm going to turn the mic over to you for just a moment to tell us about yourself, where you're from.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's David Whitmire. I'm an electrical contractor in Dallas, Texas. I got my start in the electrical trade in 1981. I went to the Dallas Joint Electrical Apprenticeship Program, graduated in 1985, obtained my journeyman's license in 1985, my master's in 2003. I currently serve on the the Dallas chapter of the Independent Electrical Contractors Association as their vice president, and also on the state IEC, or Independent Electrical Contractors, as an executive board member. Nice to meet everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to move to item C, training for the advisory board members. And since we have a new board member on board with us, guys, I'm going to turn it over to Doug.
Testing, testing. Thank you, Chairman and board members. I'm going to get set up here. Thank you. Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel for the department, and that's an interesting change. All right.
Can we turn off the lights?
Are there any lava lamps? I'm hearing no. I'll give you a little training overview. Like I said, I'll try to keep it brief. I know for the ongoing board members, we had this training last December, and we have a new member on the board today, Mr. Whitmire. And so we like to represent the training, but some of the laws have changed since the last time, so this is a useful exercise anyway. So today we'll be talking about the Open Meetings Act, the Administrative Procedure Act, and the Public Information Act. That's also known as the Open Records Act. Talk about the nuts and bolts of the Open Meetings Act. The purpose of the Open Meetings Act is to ensure open and transparent government. The Act requires meetings of governmental bodies, such as this body, to be open to the public and to be preceded by public notice of the time, place, and subject matter of the meeting. And the provisions of the Act are mandatory and are to be liberally construed in favor of open government. And what that means is if there's a question about whether or not a meeting should be open, if it's a coin toss, you err on the side of transparency and holding an open meeting. In order to understand the Open Meetings Act, we need to talk about a few key concepts. The first is a quorum. And a quorum, as you probably know, is a majority of the members of the advisory board as fixed by statute. This board, the statute gives this board 9 members. Majority of that is 5. A quorum of a governmental body, including an advisory board, must be present in order to take official action. If a quorum isn't present, the board or committee may still meet and discuss topics, but may not take any official action. Deliberation, and you'll see a little markup, and I'll explain what that means. Deliberation, under current law, effective September 1, means a verbal or written exchange between a quorum of a governmental body or between a quorum of a governmental body and another person concerning an issue within the jurisdiction of the governmental body. So you can see through the underlines, that's new language since the statute has been updated, and the strike-throughs are, of course, language that was removed in this previous legislative session. We'll talk about the nuts and bolts of this later, but let it suffice to say that if you engage in a verbal or written exchange with members of a quorum outside of a posted meeting, you are in dangerous territory. A meeting, of course, isn't just something that is preceded by notice and an agenda like today. Of course, this is an open meeting, but a meeting could also sneak up on you and occur any time a quorum of a governmental body engages in deliberation or discussion about public business in any setting. So you could be at a party talking about public business, and you look around and you've got a quorum, and you have a meeting and an open meetings violation. Notice, as you've seen in our agenda, mentions the date, time, place of the meeting, and also the subject that subjects we'll be covering today. For the mechanics of TDLR, we have to file the notice with the Texas Secretary of State at least 7 days before one of these meetings. And as we'll tell you time and again, this board or any board may not engage discussions about a subject that does not appear on the agenda. All right, having said that a meeting can happen in any setting, not just this room, what about if you're attending a social function, a convention, or a workshop? In those instances, you're likely to be in a meeting with other members of the board. Well, you may meet in such a setting without violating the Open Meetings Act if you engage in conversation that is incidental to the event, or just something completely trivial, right? Let's say that you're at a convention and all of the members are there. You talk about where you're going to go to dinner. That's certainly fine. You're not violating the Open Meetings Act. If you start talking about some technical business, you start soliciting people's opinions on an upcoming rule, you've violated the Open Meetings Act. So just engage in conversation that's incidental to the event, and just be wary or be aware if a quorum is present. And so this really just kind of restates what I've said, but also beware the walking quorum, and we're going to talk about that for a little bit. A walking quorum is something you'll hear us harp on. It occurs when fewer than a quorum of members engage in a discussion and then one way or another communicate those discussions to another number of people so that you end up having that discussion travel through a quorum. So we'll give an example. Let's say that we have a 5-member advisory board. 2 members on the board exchange phone calls and emails expressing thoughts on an upcoming rule change. And then one of those board members forwards that email exchange to another member. All of a sudden, we have 3 people engaging in that substantive discussion, and that is quorum on that board. So that is an open meetings violation. The law relating to walking quorums just changed, and you see this giant wall of text, but you can really boil it down very easily. The point of all of this is if you are a member of a governmental body and you make a communication, whether in person or online, if you know that communication is ultimately going to reach a quorum of people, or you intend that it does, you are in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So it could happen online, it could happen in person. If I'm on a 5-member advisory board and I meet with another member and I say, hey John, this is a great idea, why don't you talk to the other members about it? Boom, I've violated the Open Meetings Act. And we'll walk through how this actually you could violate the Open Meetings Act in a social media setting. Now, I don't use Twitter. My girlfriend does, I don't, so I'm hoping I'm staying true to the mechanics of Twitter. But let's just give an example of a 7-member board. So Chairman Doe tweets a link to an online news article about an issue facing the electrical industry. Beneath that link, he writes, "This could fix our worker shortage!" Exclamation point. A lot of exclamation points here. So afterward, board member Smith sees the link, and he retweets it, and that means he shares it, along with a comment stating, "Thanks, Chairman Doe." He tags Chairman Doe in the tweet. "Our board should take up consideration of this important matter." Then board member Jones replies to Smith's tweet stating, "We really need to look at Rule 101. Next, board member Williams replies to Smith's tweet saying, "I agree, let's get this done." And lastly, board member Johnson replies to Smith's tweet with an animated image of the American flag and a thumbs up emoji. And so I was expecting laughter there. That's strange. Good job. And so you see how Chairman Doe, by making that initial post, we can read that one of 2 ways. Either he was just simply trying to share some interesting news with the general public, or he really wanted people who follow him, members of the board, to communicate and engage in this discussion. But we don't know. We don't know Chairman Doe. I'm sure he's a fine person. And so it gets a little more problematic down the line. So if board member Smith sees the link and retweets it, well, he knows he's the second person in the chain. If this is a 7-member board, he knows he's safe engaging in this discussion because it hasn't reached a quorum yet. Jones is probably in safe territory. Williams, maybe not so much. Johnson is probably in dangerous territory. Because at some point, once you reach the fourth member, if the fourth member is aware that he is kind of the final person to constitute that quorum, you have a violation. Now, Twitter, I use this Twitter example because to people who are familiar with Facebook, if I post a story on Facebook and then you see people can comment below, and I can see, oh, there's board member 1, there's board member 2 who commented, there's board member 3. Okay, I had better not comment. I would be board member number 4 because I can see the people who posted before me. Twitter is a little different, in my understanding, is you may not necessarily, unless people tag you in a post, you may not be aware. So here, Chairman Doe could live his whole life not knowing that a quorum was actually engaged in this discussion. So this isn't a situation with any answer. It's just to say, here is an example of something that could potentially violate the Open Meetings Act. Don't find yourself in a situation where you are in this case, the 5th person to comment on something involving board business. So some best practices to avoid quorum issues. Members should not meet in small groups where they discuss board or committee business and then communicate those discussions to other members. Be very wary of sending emails or texts to a quorum of members, even if you send the emails on an individual basis. Be careful about creating posts on social media where there's a likelihood that a quorum could participate in the discussion. And don't go around asking members where they stand on a particular issue. That's called polling, and it is a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Stepping on to another topic, our guidelines for open meetings. Keep in mind that, as I stated earlier, a board or committee is limited to discussing specific items on the agenda. This is the trickiest when we have the public comment period. At the beginning of the meeting, I believe we'll have public comment today. The commenter will state his or her views, and there may be some temptation on the part of the board members to engage that speaker, but unless that subject is already on the agenda, we just have to kind of table that issue, move it to the next agenda where we can speak about it in more depth. And also, just to keep in mind, we have these notice requirements we talked about. So if you find yourself wandering off into territory that's not on the agenda, just be careful. And typically, one of the attorneys will stand up and try to help you correct course on that. And it's just really important. If you find yourself getting off topic, just mark an item to be placed on a future agenda. Of course, there are some penalties, criminal penalties for Open Meetings Act violations. You can see, well, there's a civil remedy first. So any interested person, including the media, can petition the courts to stop an action taken in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So let's say that our meeting today, if we're going to decide what to do with the rule, if this meeting was not conducted under the Open Meetings Act, we could potentially have the rule invalidated. And moving on to criminal penalties, if you knowingly circumvent the law on open meetings, there's a penalty of $100 to $500 and potentially confinement in county jail for 1 to 6 months. In your documents that you have today, you have some links to some open meetings training, which really gives you some more nuance than what we covered today. So I encourage you to look at that. Moving on to the Administrative Procedure Act. This board will see the Administrative Procedure Act mostly in the context of rulemaking, but it governs a lot of what we do at an agency. So it helps us to establish minimum standards of uniform practice and procedure, and provide for public participation and transparency during the rulemaking process. And of course, it guides our enforcement actions as well. A rule, and you will see one today, is a statement made by a state agency that implements, interprets, or prescribes law or policy, or describes the procedure or practice requirements of a state agency. And it's a statement of general applicability. A rule does not solely relate to internal management or organization of a state agency. So TDLR's organizational chart, internal policies, those are not rules. And you get rules from a number of sources. Legislative changes, we'll be talking about some of those today. Advisory board work groups may come up with an idea for a rule. We might have a discussion in public that the board might come up with an idea for a rule. Sometimes staff will come forward with potential rules. And every 4 years, there is a rule review of all the electrical rules or all of the program rules for any program. where we will determine if there need to be any cleanup or organizational changes made to a rule. And I think the most interesting one here is the rule petition. Now that says that any interested person may submit a petition to a state agency requesting the adoption of a rule. Well, who is that? That's a person who is a Texas resident or a business entity in Texas, potentially a governmental subdivision, or a public or private organization that's located in Texas. And so we have a procedure for that in our own rules on how to submit that petition. And if you're interested, I can share that with you later. We are in the midst of the rulemaking process, and so I'll walk you through that and tell you where we are on Rule 7320. So you start with the idea for a rule, and then typically a general counsel will help to draft the rule. And then we give the advisory board what's called a first look. We send a draft rule before the board where we ask the board to make a decision to publish the rule. And that means that the rules are filed with the Texas Register, which is a publication issued by the Secretary of State. The rule will then be published in that document, and the public will then have 30 days to provide comments on the proposed rule. During that, after that comment period closes, GC will review the comments and then re-present the rule to you. That's where we are. That's where we're going to be today in this rectangle here. That is the advisory board's second look, where you will look through the comments. You've been provided with them today for one rule, and you will make a recommendation to the commission, or you may make a recommendation to the commission to adopt the rule. Our commission, which meets next Tuesday, will review the rule filing, the comments, and decide whether or not to adopt the rule. And if the commission decides to adopt, that document is filed with the Texas Register, and the rule becomes effective 20 days after that. In the rule review process, every 4 years we issue a notice of intent to review a particular program area's rules, and similar to the rulemaking the other rulemaking process, the public has 30 days to comment. We then, GC will go through the comments and present them to you, and this body would make a recommendation to the commission if any changes to the rules are made or needed to be made. Again, we've got some rulemaking resources for you in your packet. And lastly, we'll talk about the Public Information Act, and most people call that the Open Records Act. But that's intended to allow transparency and to allow each person to know information about the affairs of government and the official acts of public officials and employees. And this will be interesting to you. The Act makes all documents, records, and other information relating to official business open to the public. There are some exceptions. But public information includes any electronic communication maintained on any device in connection with official business. And so that means if you are emailing from your personal email address, if you are texting from your personal phone, or even a TDLR device, all of those communications about public business are subject to an open records request. So if you receive a public information request either from a member of the public or someone else, for example, a journalist, please forward that request to the Office of General Counsel, and we will give you some guidance on how to handle it. And similarly, if you get a communication from General Counsel or from our Open Records Office, please respond very quickly. The Open Records Act gives us 10 days to act from the date we receive an open records request. So we need to know if records exist and where they are very quickly. So please just contact us as soon as possible if you have any question about if someone may have sent you an email that looks like a public information request. Lastly, there is some more information in your packet about the Public Information Act. And I believe that ends it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? No. Okay, all good. Mr. Jennings, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll give you all a moment to turn the lights back. Okay. All right, less than 25 minutes into my new position here, and I'm already remiss. I'm going to ask everybody to please rise. I ask you to join us in the tradition. I'd like to get started. As long as I'm the chair here, we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to do the U.S. Pledge today. On our next meeting, we'll introduce the Texas Pledge, because probably most of us don't remember it, but we'll have it where we can see it on the screen over here. So just the U.S. Pledge today. Mr. Strauss, if you'll lead us.
Pledge pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Stein. Thank you all.
Thank you for doing that.
All right, moving on to item D, approval of the minutes. Gentlemen, y'all have a copy of the minutes in your packets. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to study them yet, but we'll take a few minutes here if you need to look at the minutes from the last meeting, December the 4th, 2018. Do any of y'all need any more time? At this time, then, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Chairman Rhodes, John Sparrow, so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Sparrow. Do I have a second?
I'll second. John Lewis, second.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Moving on to item E, the public comment. Want to remind everybody that the time limit for public comment is 3 minutes. I think we could stretch that a bit or two. We'll have somebody keeping time if you've got something really significant to offer. When you come up to the microphone, we would ask that you please state your name. Please know that when you come up for the public comment, you are on record. You'll be on record. Also, the board is not allowed to respond to your comments. However, we will take them under advisement and hand it over to administrative staff who will take it from there and do with it what we need to do. Is that all good? Okay. All right. First up is Alfred Alanis, and you'd like to speak about the state journeyman license?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Please state your name. Once you get seated and settled, all good?
Yes, sir.
Please state your name.
My name's Alfredo Alanis.
All right, it's all yours.
My name's Alfredo Alanis. I'm an 18-year member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I completed an apprenticeship program in the state of Illinois, and I have moved down to the state of Texas permanently. I am now having issues obtaining a journeyman license. They are not taking in consideration the hours that I have worked up north. Unfortunately, the state of Illinois does not have licensing for electricians, only contractors. I am now currently holding a position of organizer with IBW Local 520 here in Austin, and I am running into a lot of folks that are moving to the city of Austin and that are going to be in the same position that I am in. Unable to take these licenses. I'm talking about electricians that have 15, 20 years experience. I'm looking to see if we can find a resolution to this issue, maybe accept the Department of Labor certificate showing that I have completed the apprenticeship program, which consists of 10,000 hours. I hope that we can come to a resolution and help these people and myself obtain this journeyman status in the state of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alanis. Of course, the board is not at any liberty to respond. Is anybody from staff want to take an opportunity to address it?
Carla James, TDLR. Think this is probably a discussion we can have offline with him.
Okay, perfect. All right, we'll stick around after the meeting's over. Great, okay. Thank you, Mr. Alanis. Next up is Arthur Surratt. Did I say that correctly? Hopefully.
Yes,
And you would like to talk about amending the NEC.
Yes, sir.
I'll let you get seated.
Thanks. My name is Art Surratt. I represent myself and no one else. I'm a master electrician here in Texas. Passed many state tests, back in the old SBCCI days, Houston. I carry 29 licenses throughout the United States. I pass exams. I have a simple comment. I know the state law is the NEC wholly, but I do believe, and I don't know if it can be done at the legislature or by rules or amendments, but there are items in the NEC that I think the state should look at and amend. Many other states do this. Everybody knows there's several issues in the code book that could be discussed and amended. That's all my comment is.
Very good. I think that's another matter we can do offline. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Surratt. There's no one else to speak during the public comment period. With that, we will move on to item F, staff reports, and we will start with the licensing division. Ms. Hodak?
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Hodak, the licensing manager. And my report has all of the license types for fiscal year 18 and third quarter of fiscal year 2019. With the number of new licenses, population, renewals. The journeyman industrial electrician licenses, of course, is climbing. That's our newest license type. We're now just over 113 for the population count. Our apprentices, of course, continue to climb. We're just over 84,000. And our overall population for all licenses is just over 156,000. Does anyone have any questions regarding the licensing statistics?
Any members of the board?
I also, in front of you on the table, I passed out before the meeting started. It says Licensing Division Electrician Applications. And I thought this was something that you might be interested in, just to show the number of reciprocity applications and licenses that we issue, as well as the reciprocal states. That's on the first page. And then on the second page is the number of military applications that we receive, as well as the licenses that we've issued through military experience. Just to give you an idea of the types of applications that we
Interesting.
receive.
Thank you very much for that.
And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any members of the board have any questions at this time? Ms. Hodak? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item, F2, Customer Service Division.
Good afternoon, advisory board members. My name is Tuan Nguyen. I'm one of the customer service managers for this program. Before I go into the statistical report, I do have some updates for y'all since the last time we met. So back in June, Customer Service Division moved over to our new North Campus location over here. So we are actually now located on the second floor of this building. So y'all would like to see a tour or see our operations or anything, I'll be happy to show y'all around. The second thing is we updated our contact center software also in June. That way we can increase some of our efficiencies and get a little bit more detailed reports, especially for each statute. And the last thing is we actually updated our email process. So if you go to our website, when you click on Contact Us, instead of the industry emails, we have a link that says Email Us here. It's actually a web form for emails. So we ask required information from the customers in terms of identifying themselves with their name and contact info. And they can still do the attachment piece. And the most important thing is if they choose the industry for electricians, the email always goes through. One of the main things we started doing this process because people were sending in emails that were spelled incorrectly. So as long as people go through this process after navigating to our website, 100% of the emails will go through to us. Now I'm going to start with the statistical reports. So since the last time we met, for this spring, we definitely had a slight increase in contacts for the electrician industry. A lot of the questions people are calling in about is mainly assistance to help renew over the phone, license status questions, and then of course website navigation. Not too many, but a lot of the times that we go into the website navigation, it's a lot of the reciprocity and how to fill out the forms and whatnot. And then we actually email a copy of the forms if the customer needs that. Other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all have for me.
So the trick, Mr. Wynn, is to tell them to go to the website and click on the link to send the email.
Yes.
Okay. That makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, we used to spell out the email itself to our customers, but now we're just like, just go here and spend it out. And if customer still needs help over the phone, we send them a link to go straight to the website and start from the link.
Very good. Anybody have any questions, Mr. Wynn?
No.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item F3 from the Enforcement Division. How you doing?
Mr. Chairman, board members, good afternoon. My name is Robert Reyes. I'm a prosecuting attorney with the Enforcement Division. Previously, at our last meeting on December 4, 2018, Robin Glassner was the presenting enforcement attorney. She has since moved on to the Office of the Attorney General. So I've been assigned to this board and the program as part of the building mechanical team. I work with John Medlock in this team presently. Couple of news and notes from the Enforcement Division. First of all, we've welcomed in 3 new attorneys since the board last met. Jaime Arabia and Morgan Cummings started December 17th of 2018. And then we had a 3rd attorney, Amanda Barrera, who started in February of 2019. They are classified as Attorney 3s right now, and they prosecute performance, bidding, and advertising cases involving unlicensed individuals, as well as sting cases, in addition to their other duties. Speaking of sting cases, stings, we had one on June 3rd through 7th in San Antonio. The sting involved both the electrician program as well as ACR, air conditioning refrigeration program, and was part of a 13-state national sting operation. As a result of those 4 days in San Antonio, 55 cases were opened here by the Enforcement Division after the investigation and all the information came through, a majority of which were electrician cases. So you find that persons who are advertising on Facebook or some of these other periodicals answered a call, answered an advertisement to bid on a job, and they were either under license, which means they were apprentice, or they were apprentice but not electrical contractors, or they were unlicensed, which they didn't have any sort of license at all. And so we were able to prosecute those cases. Moving forward to case highlights, you've received, I believe, 6 cases. First of all, first case I'd like to highlight is the case of Robert C. Garcia. This was a commission order that was signed and issued January 11th, 2019, that resulted from an allegation that Mr. Garcia failed in his responsibility to provide safe and proper installation and assure electromechanical integrity of all work and installations. A permit was pulled for a job by a contractor in Port Lavaca, Texas. Mr. Garcia was listed as the master electrician of record on the pull permit. As such, he is attached to the job and he's on the hook for everything that's done. The work was performed under that permit and code violations were found after the work was inspected. Mr. Garcia was responsible for the violation of the electrical contractor's laws and rules, and as of July 11th, 2018, Mr. Garcia had paid in full the assessed administrative penalty of $1,000. In the second case of Leonardo Jimenez, this was a default order that was signed by the executive director on August 14th, 2019, which found that Mr. Jimenez bid on non-exempt electrical contracting work without a contractor's license. Mr. Jimenez visited a job site in Alamo, Texas. That was part of a sting operation between October 8th and October 11th, 2018, and offered a written bid for work at that job site. Part of the job of the Enforcement Division is to identify, locate, and prosecute unlicensed and underlicensed persons offering electrical and air conditioning refrigeration work. As Mr. Jimenez was not licensed in any manner, he was prosecuted. A notice of alleged violation was sent out to him. He did not answer the notice of alleged violation, and currently he has not paid any of the $3,500 fine, I'm sorry, penalty that was assessed to him in that default order. Third case is Jose G. Bettis and doing business as Bettis Electric. This was an order that was agreed to by Mr. Bettis and the department that was signed May 22nd, 2019. Mr. Bettis failed to provide all electrical work requiring a license through a licensed contractor at 5 separate work sites in Bel Air, Texas. Those 5 permits were pulled on separate sites between July 2015 and March 2017. All of the permits identified Mr. Pettis as the master electrician of record, and therefore he was responsible for the work on all the sites. 5 violations resulted in an agreed penalty of $10,000, with the first payment of $675 due May 10th, 2015. As of today, he's paid $4,475 of that $10,000 penalty, so he's ahead of schedule by $1,100. Dallas Branson, the case involving Mr. Branson was signed, the order was agreed to and signed by the executive director on August 14th, 2019 for performing non-exempt electrical contracting work without a contractor's license. He admitted to installing electrical wiring, outlets, light fixtures, in addition to replacing fuses as part of a room conversion to a bathroom in a residence. A maximum penalty of $5,000 was requested and for Mr. Branson's unlicensed work, and the agreed administrative penalty was set at $4,500. To date, he has paid $426, which is one payment behind according to the agreed settlement agreement and the schedule of payments found as part of the agreed order. Last case that we have as a case highlight is a matter of Jose Delgado. The department reviews applications for new licenses or the renewal of current ones. Mr. Delgado had pled no contest to an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon charge and received an order of deferred adjudication with community supervision. The aggravated assault is a crime that is directly related to the occupation, as stated in the criminal history guidelines for this program. The department sought to deny the application and revoke his license. Mr. Delgado appealed the decision to the State Office of Administrative Hearings, and a hearing was held. The commission issued an order on July 15th, 2019, which revoked Mr. Delgado's journeyman electrician license, with the revocation fully probated until Mr. Delgado completed the term of his community supervision on January 4th, 2020. So with that being said, I'll move on to the key statistics, then I can answer any questions you all may have. The numbers that we have are through July of fiscal year 2019. That's the first set of statistics. The amount of penalties collected has been approximately $135,461 over the total amount of penalties assessed, which is just a hair under $580,000. Collection has been 23.4%. Right now, we're looking at 8.7% of the total collection when you look at what the Electricians program has brought forth, looking at the department's full penalties collected. That is in comparison to the fiscal year of the entire fiscal year of 2018, And I'd be remiss to say that, if I didn't say that, the August numbers for the 2019 fiscal year do not include the August numbers. Those August numbers, unfortunately, were not available when when these statistics were compiled at the beginning of the month. So I'm sure we could get those to you if you all would like them. But right now, is comparing the fiscal year 2019 statistics with the entire fiscal year 2018, running about the same in terms of percentages for penalties collected over the penalties assessed. And we are actually, this current year of fiscal year 2019, we're looking at an increased percentage of total collection when you look at the penalties collected from the program over the total amount that the department has collected. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all may have at this time.
Any members of the board have a question of Mr. Reyes?
I had one question.
Yes, sir.
So what leverage do we have to collect the rest of that money?
It depends, sir. If they're unlicensed, it's going to be pretty hard because we do not have any information on them. So it's a fly-by-night type of situation. In terms of, let's just say, for example, the sting situation, we look at the phone number or any information they give in, whether it be Greenleaf or Buenos Suerte, whatever periodical we got them on. We use that information. We run an information check on them with proprietary software that we have here in the department, and we draft up a notice of alleged violation for that. And if it hits and we get some service on them, then we move forward. But still, if they're not going to, if they don't have a license and they never plan on having a license, it really doesn't help.
You're only collecting from the guys that are.
And that, yes, correct. And the ones who actually want to keep their licenses, they'll, usually come into compliance, and they'll communicate with us. But it's hard to get penalties that are, properly assessed after an order when it is especially unlicensed individuals.
Make sure.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Sort of broaden the picture here a little bit. Child support. You don't pay your child support, you run into all kinds of problems when you go to renew your driver's license and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, sir.
I think there's one or two other avenues that people depend on for daily life that it's a roadblock for them if they don't perform. Is it not possible for TDLR to get tied into that network somehow?
Carla James, TDLR, we already are.
Yes. They're already working on it.
No, we're already doing it. By law, regulatory agencies, licensing agencies have to cross-check
okay.
that.
Good. All right.
Just an aside, Chairman, I was a family law attorney before my time began here at the department. So I'm aware you can actually get your hunting and fishing license revoked,
Right.
driver's license, anything, if you do not pay in those penalties. So that happens, just like Ms. James said.
Okay, thank you very much. And then one last question. These collected funds, do they go into Governor Perry's general fund, or do they actually stay with the agency?
Well, I don't know that Governor Perry has a general fund. Carla James, TDLR, all the revenue collected by this agency is turned into the comptroller's office like all other licensing agencies. And then that money is reappropriated back to the agencies through the legislative process. So we put it into the kitty, and then the legislature gives us some back.
Okay,
But we do not, to be very clear, we do not put in very much more into the kitty than we're appropriated back.
Right.
That's why our fees are low.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
yes. Go ahead.
Sir, I
Yes,
noticed
sir.
on the highlight, this is David Whitmire. I noticed on the highlighted cases, on the Branson case, there was a fatality. And I was just wondering, was that referred for criminal prosecution, or what happens when you have a case that involves injury or fatality?
I am not clear on that, sir. I could attempt to get you that information. All I know is that from our perspective, that was the way we handled it. This was an unlicensed person who performed this. Mr. Branson was unlicensed to perform this work. And as a result, the only thing that we could do in our process is, as far as we're allowed to under the rules and laws of the program, is to prosecute the case for an unlicensed person. That means he is not held to the standards that a licensed person is under the laws and rules. I do not know if he was prosecuted under any criminal prosecution or any other jurisdiction. All I know is that that was the maximum we could do to handle the situation from our side. And if he doesn't pay and he decides later on down the line that he wants to get a license, that will be notated through the licensing division. It'll pop up, he'll be flagged, and he'll have some answers that he'll need to offer us before anything moves forward.
So there's no way for you to refer it or to contact the police when you come across a case where there's a fatality or an injury?
At this point, sir, I can't answer that completely, only because I'm not sure if this was referred to us first by an authority. But all I know is that once we received it, we did the maximum we could to make sure that that we prosecuted him under the rules and laws of the program. But I can try and get that information from you for you, sir.
Thank you.
Apologize, Carla James, TDLR. Generally, and I'm going to look to Jerry, but we are usually notified by the local authorities that something has happened. So our jurisdiction lies in the ability to make sure they're licensed, but we don't have, as Robert was saying, we don't have any jurisdiction over the other stuff. I understand where you're coming from. It's alarming. And my husband's an electrician, so it makes it even more alarming for me. But we work in conjunction with the local law authorities.
Good question, Ms. Whitmire. Anybody else? Any other questions? Mr. Ray, thank you very much.
Sure thing. And just to add on, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Whitmire, we do work with local law enforcement at any time we can possible, and we share information when we can to help. I know that happens in other programs. As specifically for this one, I do not know, but we do work with law enforcement whenever we're able, and we don't shy away from that at all.
Very good.
Sir.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Moving on to item F4, Education and Examination Division, presented by
Good afternoon. I'm Fanny Pringle with the Education Examination Division. I just wanted to report that the Examination Review Committee met August 27th and 28th. We reviewed the Master and Journeyman exams. 33 overachieving and poorly performing items were reviewed for the Master. Of those, 2 items were deleted, 15 items were edited, and the remainder are unchanged. Additionally, 28 new items were approved for that exam. For the Journeyman, 32 poorly performing and overachieving items were reviewed. Of those, 1 item was edited and the remainder were unchanged, and 45 new items were also approved for that exam. The next ERC will be November 19th and 21, where they'll be spending time referencing the exam question items to the new 2020 NEC, and after which those exams will be republished in December. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions? No one? Is it appropriate at this time that I could bring up the question that was asked me about the time related to the administering of the examination?
Well, have you had it? I suppose you can ask any question you like,
Okay.
Chairman. I didn't know if you'd already had a discussion with Ray this morning or
I did.
not.
I did, and he explained it very well. Made a
Okay,
lot of
well,
sense.
Ray's in here too if we need to,
Where
but
is Ray?
certainly.
Yes. Just to let you know, I was approached by a gentleman who had just passed his master's exam, and he posed a question to me. I didn't have the answer for it at the time. He recognized that the test, the master's test, was divided into 2 sections, NEC and calculations, and that he was questioning the ability to not carry over leftover time from one section to another, to the other section. And I didn't have an answer for him, And the concern that I had from his comment was the fact that, we are trying to get the passage rate up. And so I wondered if that was a possibility that could be explored to help in that effort. And I asked, had conference with Mr. Prosser this morning, and he explained that the test is purposely divided into the two sections with an allotted amount of time, all scientifically derived, and that the agency wants to keep in that format in the event that the testing electrician passes one section but fails another. He does not need to be retested on the passed section.
Correct.
He can retake the test in only the failed section. If it were back in the days of the all-in-one or time allocation from one section to another, a failure in one of the sections would result in a failure of the whole test, and that made perfect sense. That's the way the CPA exam is developed, and so I think it's. I'm going to carry that message out and encourage the rest of the board to do the same. Did it make sense?
It made sense. So previously, we had one exam that included both calculations mixed throughout the NEC knowledge exam, and there was a time limit for the entire exam. And the problem that we identified with that exam was that people were taking the test and not doing the calculations, and they would spend all their time answering the NEC knowledge, and it was possible to pass the exam without doing any calculations, and that was not a good indicator of competency. We really wanted people to have competency in both fields of electrician work, and so we divided up the exam into two portions, and we require candidates to pass both portions, and there's a set time limit for the NEC and a set time limit for the calculations, because there is a standard that you need to complete these calculations in that time. If you need more time, whether you're borrowing it from another portion of the exam or not, if you have to do that, then you don't meet the standard. Right. And we don't want to change that where we would allow people to use unused time from another portion, because we don't want to lower the standard. The standard is set for competency and for safety, and so we want everyone to hit that level.
Understood. Any other discussion or questions? No. Ms. Springer, your department does an excellent job.
Thank you very much.
Right. All right. Moving on to item F5, Regulatory Program Management Division. Presentation by Mr. Jerry Daniels.
Good afternoon, Chairman Roach, Advisory Board members. Welcome aboard, Mr. Whitmire. My name is Jerry Daniel. I'm the Chief Electrical Inspector with the State of Texas Department of License and Regulations. If you would take a look at the RPM Division staff report, you'll see the notable activities we have. Touch base on this, you heard enforcement about the national sting. We also competed with the national sweeps as we do job sweeps, and we've seen well over 200 people during the 2-week period that we were through William, Travis, Hayes County. Interesting note, we actually had our first runner in some time. He left his truck and everything there. I guess he figured we would just leave, but it didn't work out too well for him. Unfortunately, after talking to his boss about the situation, he said, yeah, we got his license. He ran because he was expired. He said, but I also fired him too. Didn't mean to get the man fired, but that's between the employer and them. I mean, we try to work with everybody that's expired, and it was kind of strange because this was an older gentleman too at that. I mean, and I called a runner. I'm not going to run after and tackle him and do that, although it might be fun, but we're not going to do that, especially when everything you have's there. So it was very interesting because we haven't had that in a while. If you go on down, you can see that we had some interesting things. NFPA actually held their expo and conference in San Antonio here this year. A lot of good training information, but now that we're actually on the boards of some of the standards and the NEC Code Making Panel 17, we had to be there for meetings and everything. I do have if you look right there, you'll see NFPA Standard 78 and NFPA 1078. I do have those in the back if you would like to look at them. Really great. I'm very proud of those. Those are the first standards. Right now in the state of Texas, we got a dog catcher, we got an apprentice, we got somebody that don't even have a license that's an electrical inspector. Fact is, your grandmother can be an electrical inspector legally. There's nothing against it. Your 8-year-old child could. So we now have standards and qualifications in 1078 of what an electrical inspector has to be one. That is a very good standard. Again, it's a standard. Doesn't mean anything unless municipalities or states adopt it, but we hope in the future that's what will happen. Hopefully in the future, if we ever had anything come to Texas, we've already got a standard wrote. The great thing about it is Texas was part of this original writing. The state of Texas Department of License and Regulations now have their name in that standard. They also have their name in that standard of 1078. They will also have their name in the 2020 National Electric Code Book under Panel 17. So we've made the efforts to go national, do everything that we could to be national, be part of it, and try to help out. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Code Panel 17, but that's floating buildings, boat docks, swimming pools, appliances, things that we find a lot of electrocutions in. There's a big thing, the electrical shock death drowning that's going on. For the longest time, people were being ruled as just drowned, and they didn't realize it was the electric in the water that froze their muscles up, then they sank down and drowned. We're very passionate about that and making changes. There are a lot of big changes coming in the code of 2020 that affect that. One of the things that was done prior to us getting on, they changed the GFI limitations for marinas from 100 milliamp down to 30 milliamp. On this code panel, the marinas had basically quit building marinas since 2014 because they couldn't build them anymore. 1 or 2 boats hook up, that GFI is tripping. So we did make it go back to the 100 milliamp at the pedestal, but the individual branch circuit's still going to be 30 milliamps. So that's going to help the marinas to be able to build, but yet still help for safety of what we got. There's also now a requirement of signage at every marina or boat dock that tell you that there could be the presence of electric current and you shouldn't swim. So we're trying to do our part and save whoever we can getting in the water, because it's kind of ridiculous that anybody gets electrocuted in the water when we have a way to do it properly without having that happen. So that's a big thing to us, and we're going to continue in that endeavor through the 2023. If you notice, we'll take a look right here. You see that we were at NERA, but that's going to be on item C, so I'm going to hold off and talk to you about reciprocity in just a minute. As far as the exam development and process, everything is fair. And what you have to understand is that a master has the ability to design. If that master can't do that calculations, then he can't do a portion of what the law gives him the right to do. So it's most imperative that we know that that master electrician can do those calculations. You as an electrician know if the calculation's not right, catastrophe can happen. If we have somebody that's out there as a master that can't do those calculations, then he's really an unqualified master. This is our last shot on our exam to make sure that that master applicant is actually qualified to be that entry-level master. And for those reasons was one of the reasons we had to split the examination in part. But it's actually the same examination you had when it was one part. And as you heard from E&E, that's what we identified, that you actually did not have to take any of the calculations to pass the master exam if you got all the book right. So that's where it's at. The time limit is very important that they do it at that. Carryover would not be good, and as you heard, it would not meet the standards. So we looked at all that. The SMEs talked about that. They voted on that, and we came to where it was. In fact, they actually gave a little more time on the calculations than I was comfortable with, but that's okay. That was the vote of the group, and that's where we were. So if you have any questions on any of our activities, portion A, I'm happy to answer it for you.
Any questions on portion A, Mr. Daniels? Interesting side note. I met with all the electrical engineers in Corpus Christi.
Okay.
Not one of them thanked me for making them aware of the new marina requirement.
Exactly.
They were getting ready to design some marinas. and had no idea.
I agree with you. When I was coming up in the trade, electrical engineers actually understood the National Electric Code, but somewhere along the way, the colleges have quit teaching them the National Electric Code, and we have engineers that are electrical engineers with a degree coming out that do not even understand the code. I've actually had to explain to an engineer the difference between a service panel and a sub panel, so it does concern me that we don't have that NEC training when their design's going to fall back to that NEC whenever they design something. So I appreciate you letting them know the new Marino requirements, so it'll help them
School
out.
is in session in Corpus Christi right now. So.
There you go. If I can help you, I'll be glad to.
We're training the college grads.
That's it. Well, we went to a stalk-up class, me and my deputy chief, and it was a update class for the code change, and us and one other person were the only electricians in there. All the rest were engineers, electrical engineers out of school, and Mr. Stalkup had to ask them, he said, they didn't teach you this stuff? And they're like, no, that's why our company's sending us here. And he actually said, well, y'all need to get with Mr. Daniel, Mr. Reichel. They're going to help you out here with this because y'all need to learn it. So that is something that the colleges need to take into consideration to bring the NEC back into the electrical engineer training. I agree with you. Moving on to B, just letting you know, it'll probably be on your agenda item next time, but we are moving for the 2020 NEC. That projected date will be September 1st of 2020. The code is actually out right now. You can purchase it. Gives everybody enough time to get training and to be up and ready for it. NFPA is going through some changes, but one of the things that they do for us with adopting the code in a timely manner is they provide a training session for electrical inspectors and give them a code book. So this summer, we will probably have 1 or 2 training sessions throughout the state of Texas for all the electrical inspectors that wish to get their training. We'll put it out on notification on our e-subscribers. So if you're not subscribed, please sign up so you get notification, because you have to sign up for it and be able to come to it on that date. But when you look at what a code book costs now and you look at how much they charge for training in a day, it's roughly about $1,100 benefit to the applicant that they're not going to have to pay anything for. See, the reciprocity meeting in Utah went very good. We have 3 more reciprocity agreements in the works: Iowa, Minnesota, Alaska. And we also have 2 more that we have verbal agreements that me and Mr. Reichel made with them while we were there, with Colorado and Wisconsin. Colorado has been one that has not wanted in the past to do it, but we have got to the point to where they actually want it, and as soon as we send it, they're going to get on it. So we're doing really good. We've almost got everybody in the NERA group. We're looking at projects of adding more near states. In fact, that was one of the things we identified, any state in the union that actually has a journeyman license that could get in this group, and we're going to be reaching out to them, seeing if we can get them into NERA to make it more national than just the 17 that are there. And of course, talking and doing stuff, I got myself more work. They appointed me the chair of NERA for the next 2 years, so I'll have to handle that, and we will be hosting the NERA meeting in 2020 in Texas, so I think it's going to be a big thing. We're going to try to put together a nice event with a very good agenda to work on. One of the things we're going to look at, because we were pointed out the last meeting, we're not quite following the bylaws, so we're going to go over every bylaw, look at anything that may or may not need to be changed, and make sure that everybody is following the bylaws that are set forth for NERA. So that's going to be a big project. If you have any questions on that, feel free to ask. I'll be happy to answer.
Mark Roach, on the discussions on the reciprocity, is it with limits, or is it all the way through master?
No, it's only journeyman. Most of the states have made it very clear that they're more than happy to share their labor, but we're not sharing our work. You got to come meet our requirements. But part of one thing that is good in the bylaws, We do have that if you are a master electrician from another state, you can do reciprocity and get a journeyman license as long as you took your state test and get a journeyman. So a master from another state could come down here, get a journeyman license through reciprocity, and be working here until they actually get their paperwork or whatever done to go sit for the examination. Any other questions?
Anyone have any questions?
Okay, and then just a last note on number 4, or D, which would be the Dallas. The city of Dallas has held their license since state licensing, but they have notified us that they are now doing away with it. So that brings in the law of 1305.202, which says as long as they apply within 90 days from that program being dropped, that they will get an equal state license. So as long as you had a current Dallas master license and you have went ahead and applied with us within 90 days, then you're going to get a state of Texas master license. There's not a lot of them because most people did take advantage of the state grandfather period and took their municipal license and got a state of Texas license, but we will have a few of them coming in, and we're working out the final dates on it to what they've told us and to make sure that we get it right and their applicants have that 90 days to apply for that license of equal value.
Interesting. Anything else, Mr. Daniel?
That's all I've got.
Any questions, Mr. Daniel Ford? Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the job that you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You've got an
too.
overwhelming task. Moving on to item F6, report from the executive office.
Carla James, TDLR. Welcome, Mr. Chairman, in your new role, and welcome to you as a new member. Thank you all for your service for Texans. I know these are highly paid jobs that everyone's trying to get from across the state. And thank you on behalf of someone who is married to an electrician. I understand how important this board is. So a couple of updates for you. Not a lot to report from the 86th legislative session. We do have some things we're about to head into that I'll get into in a minute. I have the communication outreach statistics for the electricians page. Over the last 6 months, we have seen over 300,000 visits to the electricians page on our website, and that's an average of about 1,600 a day. About 40% of that comes from desktop, and of course, as you would expect, almost 60% comes from telephones and tablets. And the reason why folks are visiting are forms, frequently asked questions, apprenticeship program information, our administrative rules, and interestingly enough, the lowest was exam information, which is kind of surprising to me. Any questions on that before I move on? So the next big thing to talk about for TDLR is the sunset process. And the sunset process is something that every state agency goes through. There's an agency called Sunset Commission, and their sole responsibility is to look at state agencies once every 12 or so years and do a deep dive to see if the agency is still needed, if the mission of that agency is still appropriate, and whether or not things need to be changed. It has been about 14 or 16 years since we went through, so it is our turn again. We are beginning that next week, and it will go through May of next year. And so what Sunset will do is they'll come in and talk to all of our folks. They're going to poll our licensees and our boards and everybody who has any commerce with TDLR. We'll have that information up on our website as soon as we get started to ask how we're doing. It's very much like our strategic planning process, but Sunset will do it for us. And then Sunset will come forward with whatever recommendations they have after May of next year and give that to the Sunset Commission, which is comprised of the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the House, and several other members from both chambers, and then some appointed public members. That information will be voted on. They'll make whatever adjustments they deem appropriate, and then a bill will be filed during the 87th legislative session to make whatever changes they feel are necessary for the agency. So you're gonna see us watching that through next session to see what kind of things they're gonna recommend to be changed. We're gonna do this twice, actually, because we have so many programs and so many of them have come to us since 2016. The first dive that Sunset's gonna do is look at all the programs that were with TDLR prior to 2016, Electricians obviously being one of them. Then after they do that, 2 years from now, they're gonna look at all the programs that we've gotten since 2016. So we're gonna do this twice, so just be prepared to get lots and lots of updates over the next few years. And that's gonna be a big task for us, but we're looking forward to it. You know that we're always trying to make things lean and clean around here and use innovation as much as we can. So we're looking at this as an opportunity for an outside entity to come in and tell us how we can become better. Any questions on Sunset? Yes, sir.
One question to Mark Roach. Ms. James, that's it's appropriate to let everybody know that this time period that you're talking about is the opportune time to comment also on the components of the rules?
They're going to be looking at everything.
Right.
So I think, rules is something that we can drive our train on now. We don't have to wait for sunset.
Right.
So if there are items that needed to be discussed about rules, we propose those. There's comment periods for those. If I don't want to open a floodgate for you guys sitting up on the dais and say, everybody call your board and tell them what you want to have changed. But I'm not sure exactly what you're asking for, but I think rule changes can happen prior to the sunset process. We just need to begin discussing those in this arena.
I was just thinking of being maybe the most appropriate platform for folks to come forward.
I think it's more of a global.
Global.
It's more global than just the administrative code rules.
Okay.
It's more legislative changes to things that actually belong here at this agency. Do we have things that need to be regulated that aren't? Do we have things that are regulated that shouldn't be? Do we have programs that are better placed at another agency? Things of that nature. So I think the rules we can probably do now on our own.
Okay.
Rather than wait for sunset. So we'll be putting information out on our page when it's time, and Sunset will be reaching out. And I have not been through this process in a very long time, so I'm certain that it's changed, but there should be ample opportunity for folks to make comments.
Okay.
I think the only other thing on my agenda to talk to you about is personnel updates. I have not known any of you more than today, and I will not see you again after today. I'm going to retire in November, so they're I know, hi-bye. They're interviewing for my replacement right now, so at your next meeting, you should have a different human sitting in my chair.
I'll go. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I will still be electrician's wife even after retirement.
Anybody have any questions of Ms. James? Moving on then to the next item, item G, discussion and possible recommendation on the proposed amendments to an existing rule at 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 1305, Article 7320 regarding the Electricians program. The proposed amendments remove the restriction of the number of hours of on-the-job experience an applicant for any electrical license may claim within a given year. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel for the Department. If you will reach into the recesses of your memory and recall last December, this board approved for publication the proposed rule that you see before you, Rule 7320, where this board proposed to remove subsection C. Subsection C is the provision that says 2,000 hours of on-the-job training shall be the maximum that may be earned within a year. Just to remind you, the effect of repealing this provision is to say that an applicant for a license may get credit for the amount of hours that person has worked in a year, and it will not be artificially limited by this provision. It will not be limited to 2,000 hours. Is the microphone working okay? Okay, thank you. As we discussed the rulemaking process earlier, last December was your first look at this rule. This is your second. The comment period, I believe, opened on July 26th of this year and closed 30 days after. We received 35 public comments. As is typically the case when we receive a large number of comments, some of them are not really responsive. They may be questions or just completely off topic. So 24 of the comments were relevant, however, 24 of the 35, and they are fairly evenly split. 8 of those comments were very clearly for this amendment, 9 were very clearly against this amendment, and 7 were somewhere in between, where the commenter proposed a different approach. And so I'll explain those different approaches in just a moment. The persons in favor of the rule generally just said people who work overtime should get credit for all of that overtime. People who were against the rule stated it in a number of different concerns. One commenter said reported hours are already do not solely consist of on-the-job training because they include things like travel, breaks, and unloading and loading and unloading of equipment. One commenter said too many apprentices work more than 40 hours per week and still do not have the necessary skill to become a journeyman. One commenter said that he has met apprentices that spend most, if not all of their time doing nothing but hand digging, drilling, and tapping for grounding. And one commenter was concerned that removing the limitation would result in fraudulent logging of hours. And I'd like to go ahead and kind of get ahead of that comment. I believe that if the board were to recommend adoption of repealing this 2,000-hour limit, we still have procedures in place in licensing, our licensing division, to ensure that if someone makes a claim of 4,000 hours in a year, we can get behind that and verify that. And keep in mind that contractors are required to certify and verify experience, and so a contractor, signing a verification form on a very suspect number of hours could also potentially face penalties such as suspension or revocation. So there's not really an incentive, if you will, to submit fraudulent hours, but there's no question that someone may try it. But we will have procedures in place to scrutinize that. Some of the proposed alternatives submitted by the commenters, we see a range. Most of the people proposing alternatives suggested increasing the cap, maintaining a cap, but increasing it. Anywhere from 2,360 hours a year, which would be 45 hours per week, up to 5,840 hours per year, which would be 16 hours a day, every day, 365. And so we have 2,360, we have a recommendation of 2,600, 3,000, 4,368, and 5,840. And then the last commenter with a different alternative proposed that a person only be allowed over 2,000 hours in a given year if they are enrolled in a Department of Labor approved apprenticeship program. So you have the comments in your packet, you have the rule in your packet, and so what we are asking you to do today is to consider the comments, determine whether any changes need to be made to the rule as proposed in December. If so, we will need to republish that change in the Texas Register, open a new comment period, and then bring those comments back to you before a recommendation to the Commission. If you believe that the rule should be adopted as proposed without change, then we'd ask you to make a recommendation that our Commission adopt the rule as published, and that would become effective, I believe, on December 1st. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
John Sparrow. Mr. Jennings, I know when we discussed this previously, I think it was last year, we talked about some of the other programs and licensing requirements for other trades, plumbers and HVAC and different things like that, and what caps they potentially had, or if they allowed the hours that were accredited each year to be increased. And I can't remember what the answers were on that. We were doing some comparisons, and I can't remember where we ended up with it.
And I'll call out to staff if they have any ideas. I don't believe there is a similar limitation in our air conditioning and refrigeration program. I may be mistaken, but I don't believe there being a limitation.
It may have been the plumbers that we discussed.
I can't recall. I've looked through the plumbing rules, but it's been a few months, and so I'm really not sure. But we could certainly look into that.
The plumbers, Mark Roach, the plumbers have a time frame. I don't know that it's relegated down into hours, It does have a time frame that you serve as you progress through your licenses.
Right. I believe they have a similar structure with ours, and I know we were talking about it last time, the comparison, but I don't remember what it was and what they allow.
Now, I know one thing different about the plumbing examiners is, and I'm sure it's probably still the same thing in their testing, you actually go into a lab and you construct a plumbing system in a little model. You actually have to
Yeah, I
perform.
think they only have one lab, and I think that's kind of part of their problem.
Right.
Statewide, so.
If I could, Carla James, they are expanding that. That's just information I have. They're starting to move around the state, so there's a little bit of movement on that.
Any other questions? So the question posed to the board then, Mr. Jenkins, if I'm understanding you correctly, you need a motion from this board to make changes, recommendations, or accept the proposed changes as written?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the options for the motion would be either to amend the rule that we have proposed, which of course would result, if the body decided to go that route, would result in republication of the rule, and then we would have another visit like this at our next meeting, where I would present the comments to you, and we would consider whether to have the commission adopt. The alternative is to make a motion to have the commission, to recommend that the commission adopt the rule as written. So that would just repeal subsection C, which imposes that 2,000-hour limit.
Okay, and y'all see it on your screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for discussion.
Yeah, John Sparrow, Chairman Roach, I think last time we had a little more discussion from staff too, on what some of the implications would be on just allowing as many hours as you wanted to get, potentially brought on by overtime or different methods, whether it would be through an accredited program and different things like that. So I don't know if staff have any comments that they would like to remind us of as far as any adverse, or I guess potentially the upside of allowing the increased hours. It seems like most folks in the industry base the experience of a apprentice electrician or journeyman electrician on the amount of years that they've served, even though there's a minimum amount of hours that are required. So I don't know if anybody has any comments that they can kind of help us with and remind us from licensing or.
Well, I certainly think there's no question that the path to journeyman right now is if you're getting those 2,000 hours would be 4 years, and so you are potentially looking at someone who does 3,000 or more could take that, could have significantly less experience in terms of years than an applicant at the present time under the existing rule. So I think that is one of the important topics to note. Jerry or Larry, do you have any information you want to volunteer? If no, okay, no, that's fine.
I think one of the things that's kind of come to the surface in the industry is the fact that, especially since Harvey, there has been a lot of electricians accumulating overtime hours, and as they're trying to progress through their licenses, they're seeing if they were working 7/12s or something of that nature, they're seeing their overtime hours sort of overlooked when they cap out at 2,000 in a particular year. However, in conjunction with this rule, there's also been some discussion about early taking the exam.
That's correct. I believe we've discussed at previous meetings, we're taking a look at allowing examination at 7,000 hours. And the way that plan was posed is this would be the first phase of that.
Right.
If this rule is changed, we'll take it from here and then start monitoring exam results from applicants who maybe have logged more than 2,000 hours in a year, or some higher number perhaps.
All right, but so I'm making sure that I completely understand it. The requirement for 4 years is not going away.
The requirement of 8,000 hours is not going away.
8,000 hours.
Correct.
Is not going away. Okay, so in other words, you could with the early examination, you could sit for the exam, pass it, but you will not be issued a license until you meet the total number of hours, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr.
And-
Chairman.
Oh, I'm
John-
sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, John Lewis. So I think if the intent was 4 years, they would have said 4 years. They said 8,000 hours. So I think, my opinion is, man, if somebody can, if they work 2,500 hours in a year, then I mean, that's, they're working towards that goal. And especially if we're going to check to verify that too, when it is an exorbitant. I mean, if somebody comes in there and says, hey, we got 4,000 hours, you're like, you know, we're checking that out.
And Marcus Lennegreen. On the other side of that, the construction industry slows down and picks up over time. On the other side of that, an individual could work 2,500 hours one year and then get laid off or be out of work the next year, be 500 hours short. Well, they're only going to get 2,000 hours that first year. They'll get 1,500 hours the next year. Their time will be extended past the 4 years. So I get the idea of wanting to keep somebody working for 4 years to be able to take their test, but really in my opinion, the only fair way to do it is to give hours, credit for the hours worked, rather than putting the limitations on there, because there's other stipulations like that.
You're exactly right. I would like to speak, Chairman Roach. When we're talking these two different things, you do these both together and you could cause drastic harm to the industry, because theoretically, real-time hours, taking the test early, a man with only 2 years could be sitting for his exam. That was never the point. Since 1979, when I came in this industry, it has been an industry standard 4 years. I will tell you, the NERA groups will not accept anybody that has not had 4 years. They don't care if they've had 8,000 hours before 4 years. They will have to be verified that they've had 4 years. So these people that get in it early, it's going to be an issue. Now, the way we're approaching this and looking at this, let's take it a step at a time so we don't do harm to the industry, which could be already being done by this. Let's look at the statistics. When are people actually getting their time to take their test? Third year, 3.5 years, fourth year, when is it happening? Then after we look at those statistics, we can see, has this helped the industry to where they need to be to get the examination and get a body with a journeyman card out there versus a qualified journeyman? Or will we need to look at maybe allowing to take the test early to help complete that need? But the bottom line is, if we do them both together, we could create a catastrophe. We feel more comfortable taking a look at the analytics of what happens with the hour change. And one other note, you're exactly right. There's people out there right now that work part-time. They're getting credit for 2,000 hours a year because that's what their boss checks. They worked 1 year, but in fact, they've only worked about 1,000 hours or less. So real time is fair, because if a man does work over, he should be credited for the time that he's working. Now, on the issue of calling it on-the-job training, I don't see no on-the-job training happening out there.
Chairman Roach, John Sparrow. So if an electrician is out there and he gets 4,000 hours accumulated or 8,000 hours accumulated, he can take the test, but he cannot become qualified until he's met the time frame, as in the years. Is that correct?
No, at 8,000 hours, he's met the time frame. The law doesn't say 8,000 hours in 4 years. The law says 8,000 hours. So when he accumulates that 8,000 hours, passes that exam, he's getting his license.
So in the interest of the reciprocity, do they care about the hours or do they care about the years worked?
They care about the hours and years. Baseline is 8,000 hours, 4 years. So they will not accept, if a man qualifies to take his test in his third year, passes it, they will not accept him until he has 8,000 hours. But one of the pieces of reciprocity is they have to hold that license for 1 year before they're eligible for reciprocity. So if a man did take it in his third year with 8,000 hours, by the time that 1 year period comes around, he will be eligible for reciprocity.
Right, but he could potentially take it in 2.5 years.
He
or
could.
Even 2, right?
He could.
So if you're a civil engineer and you get a bachelor's degree in engineering, you can take your engineering test, but you're still an EIT and engineering training for additional 4 years before you can become a professional engineer.
Correct,
And
and I
so-
couldn't speak on that because their law could be different. Our law doesn't have a year length, it has an hour length. So once they've met that hour length, it doesn't matter if traditionally 8,000 hours was 4 years. We know it was 4 years. There's nothing in law that says it has to be 4 years. It just says 8,000 hours. So when he accumulates 8,000 hours, passes the exam, he's met the letter of the law, and we have to issue that license right then.
All right, so I'm not against increasing the hours. What I'm concerned about is the reciprocity and how that would affect the industry if we potentially have, guys out there who are getting their license in 2.5 years.
Well, they'll have to wait till they have their 4 years' time in to meet that baseline for the reciprocity agreement.
Okay, so it's two separate, essentially,
Yeah. The
lines in the sand.
reciprocity with the National Electrician Reciprocity Alliance is totally different what our law and rules say. We have a bylaw over here of this entity, and this is the baseline, as I call it, that we all agreed to before we send one of our electricians to their state. What happens is they apply in their state sends it back in the box to licensing. Our licensing will look at it, say, yes, he's met this requirement, and approve it, send it back, they'll issue the license. Same thing works vice versa. They'll send it to us.
That
and-
clears a lot up, Jerry, thank you. That clears a lot up for me.
I was under the impression that years and time were relative. Yeah, I'm looking at the law here, and it is just reference to time.
It is. That is correct.
Time being dictated by the fact that the law only provides for a 2,000-hour window. So it takes 4 years.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and, there's some interplay between the statute and the rules there. The statute specifies 8,000 hours to become a journeyman, and it is our rule that has imposed that 2,000-hour limitation, thus creating the 4-year path to journeyman.
I see where the confusion is. Okay.
And this rulemaking process goes back to the initial licensing when the first appointed advisory board, that was their rules that they had come up with.
I see.
Chairman Roach, David Whitmire, I have a question for Mr. Jennings, or two questions, actually. First, I believe the request to take the journeyman exam early at 7,000 hours was only tied to applicants that were enrolled or had completed a recognized apprenticeship program?
We have discussed that. I'm not sure that we have made a decision on that. I think the idea was to start taking data and allowing, maybe starting a pilot program that would allow that before expanding it further. So I think that maybe is part of the initial data gathering. I'm not sure what I think we have to have that data before we can make any conclusions.
I was here as a spectator in December, and I recall the discussion, but my memory's not as sharp as it once was, I guess. And then the second question is just a clarification. I think you answered it for Mr. Sparrow. Right now, when I get a form, there's actually not a spot for hours. It just says he's got the experience this many years or whatever, and we'll usually add the hours at my office. But so right now, if somebody, when we complete this form, if they've worked 500 or 1,000 hours, but they've got the 12 months, they're currently getting the credit for the 2,000 hours. That's correct?
I believe so, yes, sir.
It depends on the time that you actually put in, but you're right, it's years and months is what we ask for. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Lisa, we are changing the form to hours. Right.
For that reason, I would be in support of actual hours reported.
Exactly. And one more to address what you said for take the test early for people in apprenticeship program. We're a state agency. We serve the public and Texans as a whole. We can't give special favor to one organization to take the test and leave everybody out. So if you open up testing early, you open it up to everybody, not just one specific part. If you do, we're going to be in trouble from all those people that aren't in apprenticeship. They're going to say, why can't I do it? Now, I had that idea. I thought that would be the carrot for her to get people in apprenticeship programs. But again, like I was told, we serve the public as a whole. We cannot give one piece a benefit that the others do not get.
Well, and again, Mr. Daniels, I'm going from my memory from being here in December, but there was another gentleman spoke, I believe, from the Rio Grande area. And the credit was actually, they weren't going to get their license until they had 8,000 hours, first point. Second point, the credit was based upon being enrolled in a certified training program. So the ability to take the test early. So it was a requirement that was added. I don't know that you're really discriminating against anybody.
I believe that was one of the ideas that was floated. I don't know that we have decided firmly on that, because I think that the first phase, like I said, was to amend this rule and then start a plan for how we would collect data and from whom. I think there is some potential that we could have a pilot program involving just those persons enrolled in a DOL apprenticeship program, and use that data to determine whether or not to expand the program. When I say the program, I mean early testing, or to eliminate it, depending on what the data says. But it's something that we are considering. I don't know that we are married to the idea, but we are definitely considering it.
As I recall, it was one of the things is these programs are typically 4-year programs, 4 to 5-year programs. And the idea was when people do miss time, is to give them the opportunity to test while the information is still fresh on their minds. There's a lot to the electrical code, and we tend to remember the areas that we practice in on a daily basis or on a normal basis. You were speaking about marinas earlier. The last time I had a marina was on my master's test in 2003. I had that in festoon lighting. I've never wired a marina, so there is some advantage if you want to have some more people pass the journeymans to work with them to get that testing as soon as they complete their training.
Well, actually, as a master electrician, master inspector, y'all need to get the code book in their hand first year, not second year, not third year. This is a tool. This is just like your side cutters. This is just like your fish tape, just like your tape measure. This is a book that's a tool. You don't train memorization. You train how to use that tool, to use that book. It doesn't matter if I do marinas, I do helicopter pads, I do healthcare facilities, I do Class 1 Div 2 locations. If I know how to use that book, I can go through that book and I can find what I'm looking for and I can do it. Now, that is the problem that's going on that I'm seeing in the training programs. We are not teaching how to use the code book. We are simply teaching memorization of the questions that are being harvested off the test, and that is not doing your electrician or any electrician there out any good. Once they learn to use that code book, just like the rest of the tools in their tool chest, they will be a complete electrician, be able to find it. I agree with you. There are a lot of things that I didn't do in my career, but I'm able to find in that code book, look up and read it, just like you were able to with marinas. Everybody in electrical contractors, usually finds a special niche that they do very good at, and they're not worried about the rest of the code book or what they do. But we do have to be proficient in how to use that code book, and that's what makes a good electrician.
Well,
I agree. In most of the apprenticeship programs and I know the one I was graduated from, we learned to use the book. We didn't learn to memorize it. But there are programs out there, 6-week programs and things, that are strictly memorization.
I agree. And so, any other questions?
Any more
Very well
questions?
put.
Any more questions? Okay, so, if you look on your screen, you see the proposed language for Chapter 73 Electricians Program 73.20. No change to paragraph A, no change to paragraph B. They struck, for purposes of this chapter, 2,000 hours of on-the-job training shall be the maximum that may be earned within your year, and replace that language with each applicant must meet the applicable eligibility requirements as set forth in the Texas Occupations Code. And I suppose legal minds interpret that to say, if you work 2,500 hours, you get credit for 2,500 hours. If you work less than that, if you work 23, you get credit for 23. So,
Mr. Chairman, yes, that's an accurate
Right.
that's an accurate summary. And just for clarification,
and it's clear to me, but I'm old and been around, and I understand things. I'm just wondering how clear that language is to everybody else. The guy that's just out trying to make a living and get his license. Am I making sense, guys?
Marcus Lennegreen, this, if you look back at the actual rules, it states that 8,000 hours is the requirement. And all that we're doing here is deciding whether or not to recommend removing the 2,000-hour cap, striking that out.
Right, correct. I was just concerned about the interpretation. I see a lot of guys scratching their head saying, what does that mean?
I'm sorry, interpretation of what, subsection?
The
new
proposed language,
subsection?
each applicant must meet the applicable eligibility requirements.
Oh, I can help you with that. That's not new language, Mr. Chairman. That's existing. That's currently subsection D, and we would just, because we're removing C,
Okay.
is just move it back to C. Yes, because we're removing C, this one on the bottom would become C. And all that states is, despite what the rest of this rule says, you still have to do what the statute says in order to, you still have to have 8,000 hours to become a journeyman. That's
All right.
that's all of that, or X number of hours to get whatever license.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
sorry.
Any more discussion, gentlemen? Then I'll entertain a motion to keep it the same. If you want to make a recommended change, I recommend that we adopt the language as written. That's up to y'all.
I'd
Mark?
like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, David Whitmer, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the proposed rule change as written.
Okay, do I have a second?
Marcus Lennegreen, second.
Any discussion? Any more discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you.
Moving on to item H, update from the Office of General Counsel regarding upcoming rulemaking, including implementation of bills from the 86th Legislature and adoption of the 2020 National Electric Code. Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel for the department. I just want to give you a brief update of some things we'll be doing in the rulemaking arena. In this last legislative session, an interesting bill, House Bill 1342, created a new type of license called a restricted license, and it's only available to applicants within the electrical and air conditioning and refrigeration programs. And really, what this license, I'll give you a little background. For example, if a person has a criminal background of any sort, and they apply for a license with TDLR, our staff will perform a criminal background check, and obviously the background check will reveal that criminal conviction. It's then forwarded to a team in our enforcement division that will review that record, ask some questions of the applicant, and determine if this is a case where the applicant should be able to get a license free and clear, for example, a conviction that's very old or very minor, or whether it's we should commence an action to deny the application. And then there's a whole process for that. House Bill 1342 creates a little bit of a middle ground where it would allow our commission and ultimately maybe the department to issue a restricted license to one of these applicants. That would say, for example, you may have an electrical apprentice license, but you may only practice in commercial or industrial settings. You may not practice in residential settings. The bill would allow the commission to impose reasonable conditions on those licenses. For example, if we were concerned about someone's history, impose those restrictions on them that I just mentioned. Also, perhaps if we have a master, maybe that is whose conduct has been suspect, but the commission decides that they should maintain their license, could put restrictions on that person, saying you have to complete X number of hours of CLE, you have to report in to the department every month or every 30 days. Or every 90 days. We could just impose restrictions on a case-by-case basis to allow the person to remain licensed, but subject to some limitations and kind of extra requirements that a normal licensee isn't required to meet. Another interesting aspect of House Bill 1342 is currently, if a person fails to pay an administrative penalty, the department will seek to revoke that person's license. After your license is revoked for non-payment, the former law says you can't reapply for a year. You were just on the sidelines for a year. House Bill 1342 contains a provision that says if you pay your penalty or at least enter into a payment plan with the agency and remain in good standing, you may reapply as soon as you do that. So this is really able to get people back in the workforce. People that need a license, make sure that they have one, maybe a little less incentive to engage in unlicensed conduct. Additionally, House Bill 2439 is something that's on our radar. We're not anticipating any rulemaking for this, but you may have heard of this bill. It is a bill that states that government entities, so agencies, municipalities, are disallowed from adopting codes that prohibit or limit the use of certain building products, materials, or methods that were approved by a national model code, such as the IRC, the NEC, within the last 2 code cycles. It's not incredibly clear, and I don't think it's controversial to say this, it's not incredibly clear from reading the text of the statute, the universe of activity that is intended to be regulated there. So we're keeping an eye on that bill. We expect to see some action and discussion at the municipal level, and we will keep our ear to the ground on that and determine if any rulemaking is needed on our part. Like I said, we don't expect it, but that is a bill that has piqued our interest. Mr. Daniel mentioned earlier the 2020 National Electrical Code. That code was just issued, and as you know, by statute, we are required to adopt the new NEC the new edition every 3 years. Last time, we made the 2017 NEC effective September 1, and so we are aiming to bring that code forward with the same effective date of September 1st of next year. So at the next meeting, you will see our draft rule, and you will make, hopefully you'll make a recommendation to publish that rule for public comment. One note that I didn't mention on the restricted license, there is a rulemaking going on in the electrical rules and the ACR, the air conditioning and refrigeration rules, to implement that restricted license. The reason we didn't bring it to the board is it's strictly implementing the statute, and we didn't really have any leeway, or there wasn't really anything that technical expertise would help us with, so we're just pushing it through. But we'll keep you apprised of the status of that rule. We actually couldn't provide it to you today because it hasn't been approved by the governor's office yet, but we'll make sure that you receive the rule in your packets. And I believe that's it, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? So you need no action from us today on this item?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, Mr. Jennings.
All right, thank you.
All right, with that then, we'll move on to item I, recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. Does anybody have anything that they would like to have placed on the agenda for consideration for our next meeting? Nothing? All right, with that said, then I'll move on to item J, discussion of date, time, and location of the next board meeting. I think we're pretty much controlled by when you guys want to get us back in here.
Well, we know where the location's going to be.
Okay.
Pretty good there. Carla James, TDLR, we're thinking January timeframe, and we've got 2 Thursdays available right now at 1 o'clock, the 9th and the 23rd. You don't necessarily have to decide right this minute. Anna can certainly reach out to you and find out. But those are the 2 dates that we're looking at, some open time on our calendars here in this room.
What days are those?
They're both Thursdays.
Both Thursdays. Okay. So be prepared, Anna, for everybody to lean towards the 23rd. Okay.
She'll reach out to you. Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, no further business to be brought before the board? With that, I will declare the meeting adjourned. It's 3:52. 2:52. Excuse me, 2:52.